today, mostly because of scheduling issues. We are going to run Metroid 2 before Metroid 1. We have, hopefully, an expert coming in to talk about Metroid 1 with us next week. But Metroid 2 is a good game to start with because there's less music to talk about, so we can introduce all the gameplay concepts earlier, which is actually going to be helpful, so I'm not introducing them while we want to talk about the really interesting music next week and the week after. And it'll just be good to introduce us to the mechanics. And because this game is kind of the dark horse of the franchise, the Game Boy game is not great, but it introduces a lot of cool concepts that the series moves forward with. This intro music is cribbed right from Super Metroid, the Super Nintendo game. And the plot very quickly is, in Metroid 1, we realize that the Metroids are really scary things, so Samus is going to go kill them all in their home world. Again, it was an old Game Boy game, right? Not a lot of plot. This is a fan remake of that game that was released 2016, Jarel, right?
Yeah. Actually, I think it was 2017.
Okay.
Very, very recent, though.
It is excellent, and part of the reason I'm playing is because I really, really like it, and part of it is because this computer cannot actually stream an emulated 3DS game very well. And there is an official remake on the 3DS, but again, I think this is much better. It's more faithful to the 2D games, for sure.
Also, I feel like saying that the Metroids are very scary things was kind of underselling it, but...
Yeah. One of the quirks, because this is a fan-made game, you'll notice I'm going to roll in a ball a lot. That's like Metroid Samus's gimmick, the main character. But in this fan remake, she actually moves faster in ball form than she does running. So I'm going to be a ball almost the entire time. Alright, so this room here, we're going to watch this room 3 different times. One for each version of the game, just so everybody has an idea of all the different potential versions of Metroid 2. And then we'll blaze through the rest of this one. Alright, kaboom! I'm going to open up the stream proper here. I'm going to transition to, I think, this video. And as you watch, you can see everything is a lot more fleshed out graphically, but the game moves a lot slower, and I think that pretty much describes the 3DS remake relative to the one that I'm playing right now. Alright, so then let's hop over to this video. Give my stream a minute to load, my PC is garbage. Alright, here we go. Here's the original Game Boy version. Alright. And back to the high-def game that I'm playing now. So, unlike all of the other Metroid games in the franchise, again, remember, this game is kind of serving as an introduction to the rest of the franchise for lots of talking in the weeks to come. this game is a linear exploration game. That was technically the first stage of the game. You'll notice there's a counter in the upper right. It now says 0. Just to make sure I didn't mess everything up. Karen, Jarel, you still around?
Yep.
Okay. The counter that says 0 means there's no more Metroids left in this area to find. And that every time the counter hits 0, there's going to be an earthquake that reveals new locations and new areas. Otherwise, it's going to be blocked off by lava or later on just by fake walls to prevent you from going forward.
Gotcha.
And most of the time, the Metroids don't show up until like the final 5 minutes of these games. But here, they're everywhere. You only fight Metroids, basically.
The linearity was a real sore point, though, for a lot of gamers. This was like the oddball in the series because of that.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that of the major Nintendo franchises that showed up on the Game Boy, Metroid 2 was the least successful conversion by far. I feel like Super Mario Land 2, and especially The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, are way better than the original Game Boy game for Metroid 2. And this edition of the game actually caused a big controversy. It was posted onto the internet. Fans, including me, kind of went nuts over it. About 3 or 4 days later, it was pulled because of copyright. The developer had no idea that Nintendo had been working on their own remake of the game.
Oh, wow.
And Nintendo was kind of super upset that this complete fan-made game that is in many ways better was released to the public for free. Normally, I'm a big defender of emulators don't actually hurt sales that much. But I suspect that in this case, it may have.
Wow.
So, a big part of the Metroid games is making your way through all these labyrinths, finding power-ups. If you happen to know where all of the power-ups are, it's not going to seem like there's much exploration to be done. But each of these, even in Metroid 2 here, the linear game, each of these mini-dungeons, most players are not going to just know the specific route they need to go to, even though I am going to be playing basically along that route for the sake of time tonight. When I get this missile tank, note the fanfare here. That's a recurring thing throughout all of the games.
Sounds actually the music's actually a little low on my end.
I might be able to fix that.
Not sure if anybody else out there on the stream is having the same problem.
Karen, how's that?
Good, that's better. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, it is good music, so I'm all for turning it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of those, like, miracle indie games where this one was not one person doing everything, but it's a really small team that does absolutely everything on this.
And clearly they put a lot of effort in and knew what they were doing, because if I remember correctly, the primary guy in charge, I believe he's doing level design for the Ori and the Blind Forest sequel.
That's right, yeah. He, after doing this, actually got hired by the Ori and the Blind Forest team to do the sequel to that game. And
don't, for all the people watching, don't let anybody tell you that your fan works are not good practice.
Yeah, in fact, I actually just got invited to write, no one at Overclocked Remix, including Jarel, knows this yet. I just got invited to write a textbook chapter on the game audio fan community for Cambridge Press.
Oh, wow.
Which I'm really pumped about. That's going to be this fall's project.
Awesome.
But I imagine that Jarel and a whole bunch of other people are going to be hearing from me in a slightly more professional context down the road.
Well, we will be happy to give whatever assistance we can on that one. That's awesome.
So earlier today on Twitter, Jarel was making fun of the next thing we're going to go get. Metroid 2's gimmicky power. It introduced a lot of things to the franchise, actually. I'll talk about that as we arrive to each one. One of the things it introduced that was immediately discarded in all sequels is this power-up, the Spider Ball.
Okay.
There's that fanfare again, by the way.
Yeah.
And the Spider Ball, I think it's really cool, so I don't know what Jarel's problem is. You hold down a button, and look, now your ball can ride the wall.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Okay,
Now,
so
in a game where you can bounce off the walls, that's, like, not quite as useful as it might be.
I was just gonna say, though, it seems redundant here.
So my problem with it is mostly that, number one, it's super slow compared to a lot of the other power-ups you get later, like the screw attack and the space jump.
It is.
My main problem is the fact if you get hit and knocked out, then you fall way back down to the ground and have to do it all over again.
Oh, yeah, that's legit.
The original version of this game on Game Boy also had the issue where the Game Boy's resolution was cramped, so it was difficult to spider ball your way around and actually see where you were going, which made that even harder. That's not an issue in this game. It's a little better here, but I still think it's horrible and needs to go away. And I'm glad it didn't really show up in any games besides the Prime games, which actually did a pretty good job of bringing it back. So
I think the Prime games do a really good job of re-envisioning what that is. Also, it works very differently in the 3D space.
Oh, by the way, I see Kenta is chatting in the Twitch chat. If you want to try and bring him back on board, he's available.
Oh, yes, I do. Excellent. Oh, wait, I think... How do I... There. Nice, okay. Sweet, we're adding Patrick to the call. He's our resident AM2R expert. He's a composition student at Berkeley who happens to live in Michigan when he's not there. So I haven't actually met him, but I've been looking forward to it for a while.
Hello.
Hey, Patrick, welcome.
Hello. I am here. Sorry about that. Just lost track of time.
No worries. Yeah, okay, Spider Ball's basically useless. Especially, I'm not gonna get it because I want to save the boss that you fight in this fan-made game for Metroid Fusion, where he's actually from. But you can get the spring ball that lets you jump in ball form, and then it gets really redundant. Because right now you can do this cute little trick right there to catch the corner with the ball that's a little bit faster. But, otherwise, yes, not a lot for Spider Ball. It looks really cool and it's a lot of fun, but if you want to go fast at all, like, it's horrible. Because look how fast we're going now. Yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
I was going to say, I just wanted to let you know that Arachnus is actually from the original Metroid 2. He's not just from Fusion. He is in the exact same spot in the original game.
Oh, I didn't actually know that. That's awesome.
So he is not a fan-made boss. His fight is a little bit fan-made. They added a lot of elements to it, but the origin is still there. He guarded the spring ball in the same way.
That's cool. These...
I don't know if...
these breeding ground chambers you're seeing now, by the way, in the original Metroid 2 had very little music, no bass drone, just some like weird tinkling going on in the treble. There's almost zero music to work from, except for the main theme and the first couple exploration area themes. But this cool little haunting thing, that's all original material.
It's actually this one is actually a remix of the Golden Temple theme from the area above this.
Yeah.
This is actually this is one of the only remixes on the track not originally done by Dr. M64. This is actually done by Darren, the gentleman who led the Harmony of a Hunter and the Harmony of Heroes album series.
Oh, very nice.
Wow, did not know he was involved in this.
Yeah, I actually didn't either. Dude gets around.
Oof, you're playing this game way better than I haven't even, like, considered any kind of speedrun strats when I'm playing. I'm still just exploring, so...
Yeah, I've actually... for both this game and Zero Mission next week, I've been practicing a route that'll take about 2 hours to finish so that we can get through it during the time that I want to be streaming.
Cool.
And hopefully, if all goes well, it'll take about 2 hours with our stopping commentary.
I'm
Out
looking
of
forward to Zero.
curiosity,
Yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
did you want me to introduce myself to the chat at large?
I tried to do that just before you got on, but please, go ahead while I fight this boss. This boss is not from the original Metroid 2, so I have little to say about it. Go for it, Patrick.
Alright. Well, I am Patrick Baker, also known as Kenta Kurodani, if you follow me in the online circles. I have done a variety of things, but specifically with regards to Metroid 2, at one point I was the #2 Metroid 2 speedrunner in the world of the original game. I am an aspiring composer. I'm currently going to school at Berklee College of Music in their music composition for games, film, and television course. And so Ludomusicology and just game music in general has always been a huge part of my life. I've been remixing and playing with video game tunes ever since I was young, and I also know more of the speedrunning side of it. I'm a giant Metroid fan. It is by far my favorite series.
All of that
So I have a lot
awesome.
to say about the differences in the remake.
If you are on the East Coast, Karen might have news for you in weeks to come. I actually don't know where that is at and didn't want to ask in case it was stressful. But,
It's not currently stressful, but nothing is set yet. In fact, stay tuned. I have a meeting tomorrow.
okay.
So we'll see.
I go to Berkeley Online. I don't know if you remember Bardic, but I'm actually the same person that was talking to you the other day, who also lives in Michigan.
Yes, I did recall that. Got a boss coming up here. Pops out here.
That was very anticlimactic.
I know, right?
One interesting thing between the original and AM2R, and also with Samus Returns, is both games, both remakes, really tried to do their best to differentiate a lot more of the alpha fights, give you a more interesting arena or improve the AI. And it both works and it doesn't, because of course fighting the same boss over and over again is just inevitably going to get tiring, but they each kind of took their own little path towards making the encounters more unique.
Yeah. Samus Returns makes heavy use of the grappling beam for almost all of its boss fights, which is both cool, but again, it slows down the pace of the game. This feels like a Metroid game you can speedrun through. Samus Returns does not to me.
One thing to keep in mind about Samus Returns is that while the grapple beam can help the fight, it's not necessary, and especially if you have a lot of ammo, you can blast through a lot of the later Metroids.
Yeah, what's funny is I've actually not finished Samus Returns. I got to one area before the end, and then I was in DC having lunch with Jarel, and he hadn't played it yet, so I just gave him my copy.
And I only just started it 3 days ago. This was months ago that you let me borrow that.
It's all good. I'm super busy lately, so I totally get it. The wave beam that we just picked up is a power that's going to recur throughout the entire franchise. It lets me shoot through the walls, and is generally the most useful of the combat beam tools until the very end of each game.
Yeah, the wave beam is good for general strategy. The plasma beam is obviously the best choice for if you're just trying to effectively kill a bunch of enemies, but the wave beam works, I think, the best with the whole Metroidvania, the Metroid genre in terms of being able to work within the areas that you're given.
Yeah, this game, as you can tell, is really movement focused, and so unlike the plasma beam or later on the spazer, which I will get, I'm skipping the plasma beam for this run for the sake of time. The wave beam allows you to make the most of Samus's movement options, which is really nice.
One thing that I've always...
Go ahead, Patrick. I was just gonna say, this remix of
Oh yeah, let me pause here while it's playing.
This is one of my favorite tracks, and there's a lot of really good tracks in the game, but this is one of my favorites by far.
I agree. It's got a nice groove to run to, and the whistle that's going to come in here in a minute, I'll wait for it. Everything about this track just comes together very, very nicely.
I also thought it was just a really unique way of remixing the Green Brinstar theme, because they take a portion of it that people are familiar with that portion, but people, when they hear a remix of this song, they expect the whole thing. This song is basically a remix of just that bridge and nothing else.
Right.
And it's very effectively spread out so that it still sounds like a complete song, and you can enjoy it without it getting too repetitive. So yeah, the composer here just did a really fantastic job with it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, this track is a remix of a Super Metroid Brinstar theme, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the first section of Green Brinstar, the intro when you're coming down the elevator, pretty much.
Yeah.
One thing that's really interesting is that Dr. M64, while he did compose all of the remixes for this game, he did remix and except for the one area theme later in the game, he actually he did have a music career job, but it was not as a composer. He was actually a sound engineer.
Oh, nice. That's how Yasunori Mitsuda got his start doing music as well. Famously doing the Dragon Screech in Final Fantasy V before he actually got the composition job.
That was one thing I forgot to mention. I have done a developer interview with Dr. M64. If anyone wants to look that up, took place during the first Metroid speedrunning marathon. He gives a lot of really interesting information about the game's development. He was speedrunning a demo of the game.
Nice. Yeah, I do want to point out, if someone was really good instead of just kind of good like me, it's possible to finish this thing in 26 or 27 minutes. But I've got book chapters to write mostly instead. I like that. See this block, you can roll through it. That's because that's the block that hides the power up here. And when I get this particular one, I really like this sequence. It's a callback to the Game Boy Edition. This is the moment, it's Metroid 2, that gives Samus the spikes on her shoulder plates, right here.
And we never look back. One interesting to keep in mind with regards to the Varia suit transition is that it was actually only there because of development restrictions. They couldn't just have Samus's color change since the original Game Boy was black and white. Therefore, they added the shoulders to the Varia suit and added the movement speed to help differentiate it more from the original Power Suit.
That's right, and in the original Game Boy version, they also invert the grayscale coloring of the suit once you get that power up too. It's Super Metroid that introduces it to us as this orange color that you see now. Actually, yes,
I do believe it was orange on the box art.
That might be the case for Metroid 2, not for Metroid 1.
Correct.
I also really like this remix as well. It's an interesting take.
I like that it's different from the first Brooding Grounds, because in the Game Boy game, it is not. And it feels like especially not lazy to me, and awesome to differentiate this one. When in gameplay, I'm doing the exact same thing, right? There's 3 Metroids down here, gotta go hunt them and kill them.
I personally enjoyed the Ryoji Yoshitomi soundtrack for the original. He went on to work on Wario Land, amongst a couple other properties. But I definitely understand how, it is kind of hard to create a really immersive, subtle soundtrack on a Game Boy. You're so limited with your synth choices that it's harder to reach that kind of ambient atmosphere. I do think he did a commendable job based on the tools he was working with, though.
I agree with that, yeah. Ambience is one of those really hard things to do until you can have, an echo channel, right?
Exactly.
Link's Awakening, which someday I will play on this stream, I hope, does a really good job of it, creating its atmosphere, because the whole thing is a theme and variations on a single melody, and you don't realize it because it's really subtle.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until only about a year ago. I read an article on it. I forget who wrote the article. I need to look that link back up and share it. But
that's right. It was some very smart person who's popped in the stream chat before to say hi, and I forget exactly who it was because he's not a scholar or a friend from Overclocked Remix. That's the only 2 groups of people I know how to keep track of.
Yeah, but the article discussed like every single variation of the dungeon themes. I'm just like, I cannot believe there's so much in this soundtrack that they pulled off with only the Game Boy's small instrumentation to go on.
And Link's Awakening is one of those games that, like, I know that game. Like, I should have, it's like my job to understand that before somebody I don't know on the internet comes up with, oh man, it was such a good article. Yeah, I should link that in the chat later.
It's funny that you bring up games where like you have like one central motif, because I actually just finished another game like that on my stream last night. I was playing through Celeste.
Oh, nice. That's on my list to get, but no money right now. I want to get a Switch at the end of the month, so no more Steam games.
Understandable. It is on the Switch too.
So during my test runs to play through this game, this is the only fight in the game where I would potentially run out of missiles. You have to fight a lot more Game of Metroids, but for some reason this is the hardest one. For me, anyway.
I think it's due to the layout of the room, I believe. Like, you got those weird little pits which want to suck you in and like let the gamma attack you pretty much.
Yeah, but now it's done, we're home free. The rest of the run is actually pretty easy.
Now, as someone who has played enough of AM2R and Samus Returns, I have my own opinion on this. I'm curious how you feel about the difficulty balancing between the original, this one, and Samus Returns. Which one do you think nailed like the best balance? I feel like a lot of people would say AM2R generally trends towards the easier side of things, whereas Samus Returns isn't afraid to be pretty hard. And I think it's a little more in the spirit of the original, maybe making you feel a little more like you're fighting an alien planet.
Ooh, this is a good question. And I think, in terms of difficulty, the Game Boy game is the hardest of all three of them, for a variety of reasons. First, the screen is so small, it's just harder to navigate because you can't see as much. And it's more repetitive because of the limitations of hardware. And I think Samus Returns is a much harder game than this, for sure. In terms of pacing and tempo, I feel like this feels more like Metroid to me than Samus Returns does. I'm not a fan of the melee strike that slows everything down. I do realize it's not essential, but at the same time, you can't really motor through it in 90 minutes the way you can this in a way that feels like a zero-mission speedrun. Does that make sense?
That's perfectly understandable. I actually, while Metroid 2 was my claim to fame, though the scene has grown past me nowadays, but I have speedrun all 2D Metroids except for the original. So I do understand what you mean. I even did some speedrun strat developing for this game back when it was first fully released. I was actually talking, because me and the doctor are friends and we talk a fair bit. We were talking about some potential improvements that he was going to do in the 1.2 update to help with speedrunning, but unfortunately, right after that, he got the DMCA from Nintendo.
Yeah. And I've not tried it yet, but apparently there's a bunch of fans that have gotten hold of some version of the source code and patched the version I'm playing to have more options, including a randomizer. But I can't really speak to that. I didn't want a chance ruining my working copy for the stream tonight, so I haven't messed with it yet.
Yep, that's understandable. I don't think it's so much that they got access to the source code, it's that I believe that they reverse engineered it.
Okay. Yeah, and I know that legally that matters. Practically speaking, like, from just a player's perspective, I don't care, right? Like, they were able to modify it in some way.
Understandable. Yeah, I believe if the doc released the source code, that could have been considered a DMCA violation.
That's right. Also, Jarel can be thankful there's very little Spider Ball going to be happening now because I can just jump infinitely now. So Spider Ball's pretty much done.
I thought that this was a really good callback for an upgrade that kind of felt unceremonious in the original.
I agree, and
like adding in a Torizo.
Traditionally, I think Metroid 2. Well, first of all, it is the game that introduces the space jump, where I can just jump as much as I want. But for a power-up that is easily the best power-up in any game that it appears, I think Metroid 2 gives it up too easily. One of my criticisms of the original Game Boy game, if I was a modern game designer, is I'd swap this area with the next one.
Based on someone who's played quite a bit of the original. I would definitely agree. One thing that I feel is that the developers felt it was necessary. Now that they were able to have such large rooms, I think they really wanted the player to be able to explore like the whole vastness of the rooms early on and be able to build more vertical level designs. Because the original game was so locked into tight corridors and hallways because of the limitations of the NES, where it could only do vertical or horizontal screen scrolling at once. When they got on the Game Boy, which is a little more free in that way, they wanted to give you your vertical movement tools, such as the spider ball and the space jump early, so they could immediately take advantage of that freedom.
Yeah, I just don't think they realized how powerful Infinite Jump is. And you'll notice that all subsequent Metroid games, it's like the second to last power-up you get.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not going to pretend that R&D 1 was a perfect development team. I just think that was their rationale behind it.
Yeah. This gamma, by the way, is the game's easiest. Because you have a nice long vertical hallway here. Just shoot up forever.
And on the subject of the space jump early, like, clearly they learned from all this, because really, I feel like Metroid 2 was basically them figuring out what they could do in preparation for creating perfection, really.
Agreed.
And this is just like a step on the way to greatness, and so yeah, of course there's some missteps, but clearly they were learning and took full advantage of that.
I've also done my fair share of study into game design, and there is some interesting things that they do in concession. The common understanding of Metroid 2 is that it's a linear game, but what a lot of people don't tend to realize, they just kind of write it off as such, but it's linear in the same way that it's actually even less linear than, say, Fusion, which is another thing that a lot of people would bring up, because even though you go through the areas in a certain order, within the areas is almost entirely freeform. There's very, very little gating.
Yes, that's true.
Which has made for some problems when I started playing this game and ran into a gamma before I had anywhere near enough ammo or anything to efficiently take it out.
Yeah, if you find that Gamma Metroid early before you get the missiles here. Like, the order you're seeing me play the game right now, there's not a lot of variance.
Yep. I do think that's one aspect that both remakes kind of missed. I think that Samus Returns actually did a little better than AM2R. I feel like AM2R has a little bit more of a telegraphed path where it wants you to go first, whereas Samus Returns does a little bit better about like keeping it relatively freeform within the areas.
Yeah. Alright, down here next. This track, by the way, is my least favorite track on the AM2R soundtrack. I think it gets really repetitive, which is why I haven't had much to say about it.
Yeah, I feel like it was... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that this is a remix of the Great Temple theme, or either Temple Grounds or the Great Temple theme from Prime 2. And I was going to say that it's interesting how Samus Returns kind of, in general, remixed more of the 2D Metroid songs, whereas Dr. M64 kind of generally went with Prime in this game.
Oh, see, I would have suggested the other way around. Because, I
feel like
there are some Prime remakes here, but the timbre you hear feels more like an older game, whereas Samus Returns feels like it's channeling Metroid Prime more often.
Yeah, I noticed that in my listen to... Like, I've only played the first 15 minutes of Samus Returns, but I went ahead and listened to the entire soundtrack in preparation for being on tonight. And Samus Returns really only remixes like Super Metroid tracks and some original tracks, but the entire soundtrack itself is very much like a Kenji Yamamoto style. In fact, I double-took when I realized it wasn't him that composed it.
There's like especially one track on Samus Returns that's like super choral, and it sounds exactly like it was cribbed from Metroid Prime.
So it's interesting how it does that. Like, yeah, this game does more remixes of Prime music, but in the style of the originals, while Samus Return does more remixes of the originals in the style of Prime. And it's interesting that the two games took those varying positions when Dr. M64 had no idea that Samus Returns was a thing. They just happened to perfectly like compare like that.
Oh well, that counts. Good enough. Check that out. I'm amazing.
There's a phrase in the Smash community. It says that we take those.
This sequence is one of the polarizing moments in AM2R. There's nothing like it in either Samus Returns or the original Metroid 2, where you have to control this little mini robot with the super missiles. I'm okay with it, actually. I like breaking up the gameplay a little bit, and this is a smart way to do it. But, as Patrick pointed out, it feels very much like Metroid Prime and not like a 2D Metroid game. Oh. You know, this is the only time in all the tests I've done to run this game that I've messed that up, and it's going to cost me like a full minute. Great. I'm amazing at this.
This robot section is very kitschy sometimes. Like, since you can only move by jumping, you have to be incredibly careful at times.
Yeah. Alright, we're done now.
One thing that I think that AM2R really nailed that Samus Returns just didn't was the enemy design. Like, Samus Returns, unfortunately, I don't know if it was due to time constraints or just lazy developers, if I'm being honest, but like, they just kept reusing the Area 1 and 2 enemies most of the whole way down, and just gave them like new color schemes, and it really didn't feel like there was as much of like a real life on the planet, and it made the planet feel a little more artificial running into the same enemies. Like, even if it's the same enemy in action, the fact that they bother to reskin it in the original and in AM2R makes the planet feel a lot more vibrant, and like there's like life.
I agree.
Yeah, it feels like a real ecosystem.
And later on, you're going to see a lot of smart call-outs to Metroid 4, which takes place in the same planet as this game.
Back on the subject of the enemies, it's kind of disappointing in that case that Samus Returns does that, because one of the biggest things about the original version of Metroid 2 was the fact that unique enemies was one of the main identifiers that the developers used, because they knew that it was going to be difficult for players to get around when it's all black and white and it's tiny screens. So in addition to trying to differentiate the graphics for the rooms as much as they could, they also included like a lot of unique enemy skins, but also quite a few unique enemies that you only ever see in like one room of the game, to help you remember that this is like, hey, this is an entirely different room, and here's where it was, and I remember this enemy was in it, so I won't forget it, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, especially because the tile designs in Metroid 2 for Game Boy are so similar. It's the enemies that differentiate everything. Oh, I gotta run here. My bad.
One very cool thing in the original that I feel that both games missed out on in regards to enemies was, if you paid attention in the original, like, for the most part, beyond the Metroids, they're kind of stopped being enemies, especially later in the game. There was less and less of them, and there were like fewer and sparser in between, and it really felt like the game was trying to tell you the story of like the planet being, like, the ecosystem being bled dry by the Metroids, about how they were an unhealthy thing in the ecosystem, even if they were keeping down an even worse thing. And I feel like both games kind of missed that, like, kind of subtlety, especially Samus Returns. The final areas in Samus Returns feel very video gamey and artificial. There's like covered in life everywhere, especially like there's a couple of rooms in the game that just feel so incredibly like no person would ever build it.
Yeah. Well, similarly, though I have not finished Samus Returns, I did spoil it for myself after I gave up my copy. And in the original game and in this game, we'll see later, the final moments are like super chill, and this is the only Metroid game where that occurs. And the final moments in Samus Returns for 3DS are like the opposite of that.
Yes. I do think it was understandable to go in that direction in Samus Returns, if only because it does... it finally gives us at least canon resolution as to certain plot points that became plot holes going from the Prime games to Super.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I totally respect that, because like the ending of AM2R and the original do give that very different vibe. Like there is no escape sequence, there is nothing like that.
Right.
One thing that it really differentiated Samus Returns for me in regards to like the whole visual flow of the areas was the backgrounds. I feel like they really went out of their way to create like some very dramatic backgrounds, and it gave a lot of sense of like depth to the planet. Like you start out the planet during the daytime, but then when you go back up in the ending sequence, there's like intense storms, and like there's like some very beautiful crystal cave sections and things like that. And I feel like they really tried to like give the world of Metroid 2, which was generally a bit visually indistinct, like a real sense of life.
Yeah. Also, if you happen to be able to track down a copy of the 3DS game, that is the second best game to use the 3D effect on. I highly recommend it. Only Bravely Default's towns are better.
Oh, really?
Yep.
I would put Link Between Worlds
Link Between
somewhere on that
Worlds.
list.
Yes, I agree with that as well.
Yeah, I got lucky. I was actually able to get one of the limited edition 3DSs.
Oh, nice.
By the way, you guys might be wondering why I'm never waiting around for the missiles that drop from the Metroids when I fight them. They never drop super missiles, so I just don't care.
Now, I'm curious as to the other hosts here. What is your guys' opinion on this specific area? I know a lot of people aren't a huge fan of how heavily darkness themed this area is. They feel like it impedes a lot of the flow of progress. But I do feel like it's in line with the original in terms of feeling like this overgrown, like, damp, dark area.
So I understand why people say that, but I personally loved it because I'm huge into the atmosphere that this series provides. So coming into a spot like this, I was just like in love, honestly.
Yeah, and it is harder, but I don't know. It's fine. This is not a series known for its high degree of difficulty for people who just want to get through the game. I admit, speedrunning one of these gets real hard if you want to, like, be the best. But for just completing the game, I feel like there's a pretty low bar to completion most of the time. So why not have some fun? Also, without the darkness, this would not feel differentiated from the other two breeding grounds at all, in my opinion.
I think that's a fair point. They do some interesting things in the original to make it distinct, based on like the enemy types and then like certain aspects of the way the rooms are laid out, but the visual vibe is fairly similar.
Yeah. It occurs to me I forgot to get a beam upgrade in the upstairs part of this area. I am going to go back for that because I don't get enough missiles to finish the last boss without getting ammo during that fight. And without the beam upgrade there, I can't actually get any more ammunition during that fight. So we're going to be going back upstairs, wasting some time. Not a lot.
One thing I am curious, are you going to be going to the optional Galactic Federation area? Because I feel like that's one of AM2R's strong points that doesn't really get talked about enough. Like the optional area, which like kind of hints towards the future as opposed to looking to the past when it comes to this game. And it also gives a bit more context for the story of this game in terms of like the teams that the Galactic Federation sent before you arrived.
I am actually not going there. I know what area you're talking about. But because I want to finish this in 2 hours, including like stopping to talk about music in each new cool area, it adds a lot of time because that's by far the longest backtrack in the game.
That's reasonable.
It is a cool area though. I think the coolest area, personally, is the added 5th area that has the gravity suit and the ice beam from... it doesn't feel like a Metroid 2 area, but I really like it anyway.
I would agree with that. One thing that I really liked, Famous Returns did a good job of keeping the areas visually distinct, but and expanded on what the theming for the original areas was. But AM2R really made the planet feel like it was a functional Chozo society. Like each area had a purpose.
Yeah, and actually the area choices for a lot of them are the same. The hydro station, for instance, the water station, is also a water station in the 3DS remake, if memory serves. And the second to last area is like a biological nest where we fight the big Omega Metroids later. And then the final area is a genetics laboratory that's designed by the Chozo. The 3DS game inverts those two, where the very last area is biologic and like Metroid focused, and the second to last area is a Chozo genetics lab. So, without being able to obviously know what Nintendo was thinking, Dr. M64, the guy who made this game, he was like, he had Nintendo's number in many ways.
One little anecdote a lot of people don't know, Dr. M64, while he didn't get a job at Nintendo like a lot of people hoped he would, he has gone on to continue to do game development. He is now working as a level designer for the new sequel to Ori and the Blind Forest.
We mentioned it just before you got onto the call, because we think it's awesome.
Yep. Miltone is an amazing guy. I've gotten to know him pretty well through a couple different interviews I've done with him, and he is just... He is someone who came to game development in such an interesting way through such a fan project, and it ended up just being something to keep him.
By the way, we're talking about like allusions to Metroid Prime occasionally. This type of drone feels borrowed from Prime to me.
Oh, absolutely. It's very much like the Prime ambient area drone.
Yeah. And I'm actually going to be playing a clip from Metroid Prime next week when we do Zero Mission, because the map rooms for Zero Mission are directly cribbed from Metroid Prime, like note for note. So we're going to be visiting. I can't stream Metroid Prime emulated in real time, but I'm going to record some videos and do cool stuff with it. Alright. It's going to take 2 minutes added to our time, but I have to go back for the Spazer because I'm skipping Plasma Beam later. So we need the beam upgrade here or the next beam upgrade. And the next beam upgrade is like a 10-minute job, and this is not that long. So we're gonna go.
One thing
go back here. Go ahead, Patrick.
One thing I was gonna say is that like Prime is also just not really something that's achievable within the time slot of your thing. If anything, like a series of saves might be a better idea if you ever were to stream it in the future.
Well, we've beaten like Final Fantasy VI on this stream before, so it could be done. We just have to dedicate multiple weeks to it.
Oh, yes. I was just...
But you're right, in a single week...
Typically saying...
I think I actually can beat Metroid Prime in 3 hours, but it wouldn't be at any pace that somebody wants to stop and talk about.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just forgot to go in this room when I was up here in this industrial complex, so we'll go in here. Upgrade the beam real fast. It's not just about a wider range. Each one of those 3 beams hits individually, so it triples the power of your beam. Even though it doesn't explicitly tell you that. And I know that's also true of Super Metroid. The Spazer beam is introduced in Metroid 2, and I don't know exactly how much power it adds to the beam when you get it there. Since the beams don't stack there, I imagine you could just skip it and move on to, like, Plasma Beam. But Patrick could confirm that.
When it comes to collecting beams, are you talking about just in the original Metroid 2?
Yeah, I imagine you only get Ice Beam, right?
That is correct. Though there was some discussion for a short while on if we're going to continue to do that. The reason why we chose specifically to only get Ice Beam is because beams in Metroid 2 rather are not only does the game not really track whether you have it, like it tracks what beam you have in your inventory, but every beam pickup will respawn if you leave the room, just like in the original Metroid.
Sure.
But not only that, there is a spot in the first area was Zeta Metroids, I believe it's Area 5, where literally you have 4 item rooms with each beam stacked on top of each other. So the difference between a Metroid 2 100% run with all beams and the difference between a Metroid 2 100% run with just Ice Beam is literally 2 minutes, like a minute and a half of collecting items.
Oh yeah, that's silly.
An interesting little anecdote, we've actually, I wasn't even aware this happened until just a couple of days ago, but out of the blue, Behemoth and Metroid McFly, the well-known Super Metroid and Metroid speedrunners, respectively, came through and took the number 1 and 2 times in most categories of Metroid 2. They've been in the community for a while, but like just out of the blue, they decided to run 100% and just took the 1 and 2 times in that.
Huh.
Wow.
So this is the first part of plot that really Metroid or AM2R adds to Metroid 2, that you're sent in to see what happened to a research team, and look, they're all dead, of course, the Metroids have gotten to them. But it's cool that they add just a little bit of lore, and actually if you pause, there's a way to do that somewhere. Here, you can look through all these different cool lore things. And again, I'm not doing it for the sake of time, but it's cool that they've added a whole bunch of plot sketches and things along the lines of what Metroid Prime did, where it's optional. If you want to just blaze through and not scan anything in Metroid Prime, like, that's a legitimate way to play the game. Or if you want to do a bunch of reading and immerse yourself in the world, that is possible as well.
One thing I will say, you seem to imply that this plot point was not in the original. In the original, you don't find the team, but the original plot still does discuss the research team and then the firing team being sent in.
Yes, but you don't see it in-game. Whereas here you get to, like, actually find the team. Twice, actually. That's the first of 2 times you find people on the planet.
And just as a quick aside to explain to people what me and you were speaking of earlier with regards to the optional area, just in front of that area that he went into with the research team, if you looked in the ground, there was what appeared to be like a crashed elevator. You would have to come back with power bombs to clear that.
Yeah.
But if you clear that and then go up, you would get an elevator which brings you up to the surface, and you can explore a hidden area where you get to see the room from the start of Metroid Fusion, as well as the ship that the Galactic Federation group came in on, as a little bit of a added area with an additional boss and some extra items. And I just wanted to explain that in case the people didn't know what we were talking about, who weren't as familiar with the game.
Oh well. Win some, you lose some.
So seeing as you guys are a good bit more experienced with music than me, I'm not the best at identifying this. Is there any sort of compositional techniques that you guys have noticed in terms of between either Samus Returns or AM2R that really define their soundtrack?
AM2R uses this ongoing bass drone for all these ambient areas far more than any of the other remakes of the game do. Samus Returns does more to put more music in, but I don't know if I like that necessarily. Like, I kind of like the minimalist approach here.
If I had to describe
each one of these drones has been different, which is also like one of those things where the Doctor wouldn't have had to do that to make this game, but it's cool. It's one of those things that makes it really worth the download.
Yeah, each mission statement of like the game, like each game feels like a version of Metroid 2, but it feels like each game is a different mission statement. Like the original Metroid 2, especially with how ambient the soundtrack got at times, felt like it was almost designed to feel like desolate, whereas Samus Returns and AM2R both describe a lot more of a living planet. Like the Metroids seem to have like a better place in the ecosystem, so to speak. And then AM2R definitely seems to trend more on like a bit more of the technological themes, whereas Samus Returns balances a bit more the natural and the artificial.
I could see that. I wonder how much of that comes down to what you can do in terms of hardware. Because even this game, well, obviously it's not facing the same limitations that the Game Boy game did. It's not as capable in terms of its sound engine as Samus Returns either. Oh, come on. 1. Okay, no. I am not jumping over that lava area without a speed boost. That's not a thing. Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. We'll do it. That's legit.
I mean, you didn't jump over it without a speed boost.
Yeah, fair. I'm actually I'm hitting this save point, actually not because I need to save, but because I need to have my 8 super missiles back for the next thing I'm going to go do.
Now, one thing I was going to ask, I don't believe save stations in Samus Returns refill you like this. How do you feel about that choice in AM2R? In Samus Returns, it feels like a bit more traditionally Metroidy, that like the resources you have at the time are the resources you have to deal with. Whereas in this game, like they want to refill your resources in between ventures.
I want to say that's one of the few things about this game I don't like, but at the same time, the Prime games also kind of did that, where most of the save stations refilled everything. So it kind of just comes down to personal.
Energy, not ammo.
Oh, that's
Here's
right.
the
that's
thing:
right.
Samus Returns has ammo refill stations. They're just in different places in the save points. And it's my opinion that if you're going to include those, you might as well put them all in the same place for the sake of player convenience.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because the original game also had ammo and missile refills, but those were completely separate.
Right.
Those were things to be searched out, and we actually have to route around them even in a speed run. So it's interesting that each game kind of takes their own approach.
The other thing that Samus Returns does that really breaks tradition with Metroid, though there's a rudimentary version of it here very late in the game. Oh wait, I don't need that save point, I use the other one. Is that Samus Returns lets you warp around each area a lot compared to almost any other Metroid game. Because there are like warp points within each area that you can use. Whereas here, there's one spot at the end of the game you can warp back to previous zones, that's it.
Personally, and this might be a bit of a controversial opinion, I think that with specifically dealing with the limitations of making a remake of Metroid 2, that the teleportation system in Samus Returns is one of the best ways to deal with it. Because if you compare, like, I brought up a comparison to Fusion earlier, where both games are like linear on the major level, but not as linear on the sub-level in regards to what's happening within the areas. The difference between Metroid 2 and Fusion is that the Metroid 2 areas, due to it being designed as a planet where you're inevitably always delving downwards into the caves, are significantly more of a pain to backtrack to. So you're very much less likely to go back and explore those areas with new abilities, which is why they pretty much didn't do any item gating in the original game. But with AM2R, it's only really viable to go back at the end of the game, like you mentioned, whereas in Samus Returns, it lets you like get more of a familiarity with the map in a more traditional Metroid sense, where you're not afraid to go back to the start. You're not afraid to go back to an early area because you don't have to invest all that time in climbing back up the central shaft.
Yeah, that's
Whereas
true.
in Fusion, you have the elevator rooms, and you can get from one area to the next by simply just going up an elevator, or late game, even just using the shortcuts in between them.
Yep.
Like, having a central hub area was super central to Fusion not feeling like a slog.
Yeah, and I don't mind the teleport systems in either game. But it's one of those things that like feels unique to Metroid 2.
I can understand why it would be useful here. Like, I would not really like that kind of thing in any other Metroid game, but 99% of the other Metroid games don't need it because their entire environments are built to be explored.
And there's lots of twists and turns. Like, I can tell you off the top of my head 3 different ways to move from Brinstar to Criteria in Super Metroid, right? And that just doesn't exist in Metroid 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the big flaws of this game, and it's one thing, like, I've watched some different, like, analyses of both remakes, and it's that a lot of things that the people fault the game on are flaws that, if they were changed, would inherently, like, you wouldn't be playing Metroid 2 anymore if you didn't have to worry about backtracking up that whole way, because then it would be a completely different map design, and it would change the feel of the game entirely. You wouldn't feel like you're delving deeper and deeper into this dangerous planet.
Right. Oh, wait. I'm used to him as the first Zeta I find, so I didn't account for the pause. Okay.
And so I feel like when you're remaking a game, like, you can't, as nice as it is to have the option to take out some things, like, you have to deal with certain things about the original game which define it. Like the same thing I was saying earlier about, like, how the Metroid battles in any of these games, no matter how much you do to differentiate them, become kind of tiring. And it's like,
yeah,
especially like the alphas. Like in the original, the alphas were so little of a threat by the end of the game that you could just kind of just jet through them very quickly, and it was convenient. Whereas like they do their best to keep even alphas more interesting late game in stuff like AM2R and Samus Returns, but that you run into the opposite problem of, now you have to spend all this time and invest in learning these alphas, even though you're so far beyond them in terms of power.
Right. Hey, I want to listen to the music for a minute. This is a repeating, I think, slow 2 measures of loop, but it's a very iconic one to a Metroid player. Mm-hmm. That this is the beginning of Ridley's Lair from Super Metroid. And so you're put into this state of, like, waiting for something big to happen for this entire area. And there's a really important reason that the music does that in AM2R at this point, which I'll be getting to shortly.
So you are at least activating the thing?
I'm going to go get the power bombs, yeah. If that's the non-spoilery way to say it.
Will you be activating Central Tower?
I'm not going to turn on the tower. I'm going to go below it after I get the Metroids cleared out. I felt like that sequence below the big tower that I've kind of been moving around is AM2R's coolest new thing that it brings to Metroid 2.
I absolutely agree with that. It was pretty amazing.
One thing I would like to say is that once you have power bombs, it's actually a very, very short trip to go and turn on the tower if you wanted to just have a chance to show off all of the game's music.
Oh, can you turn on the tower without having to fight the plasma beam boss?
Yes. All you have to do, you have to turn on the tower to even reach that boss.
Yeah, I was just going to skip that completely.
Yeah, once you have power bombs from beneath, there's a power bomb door just up the tower that you can just go in, activate the tower, and walk back out.
Nice. Okay, I'll take care of that then.
Yeah, no. As far as I know, don't like. I don't want to lie to you, but if you did get locked in, which I don't believe you do, honestly, but if you did get locked in, I believe you could just reset the game. But as far as I know, you can just walk right back out once you have power bombs.
Okay.
I do not believe it locks you in. I
think I forgot one Metroid up here. Yep, right here.
This Gamma Metroid is what we call True Sand Gamma in the original Metroid 2, because the very first Gamma you fight in the original Metroid 2 is in a room full of sand, but this one is the only one where its entire arena is defined by the sand. especially in the original game where you couldn't clear out sand nearly as effectively. The whole room was pretty much built out of sand, and it became a very interesting fight to make strategies for.
It's a very hard fight to do quickly in the original Metroid 2, yeah. Alright, so now, like always, the lava's going to recede. And we're going to gain access to the rest of the musical track that's playing, essentially, which I think is really cool. But just like we went down below the Hydro Station to get the Varia suit, we're going to go down below, now, here, this big tower. There's the power-bound door, by the way, I'll come back to that. And now down below to the ground to access this new area that's going to shift music here shortly. Yeah, the music has now shifted. We're starting into the new track here.
One thing I really love is that how he purposely uses those slow doors twice, like in different effective ways. The first one to build tension for the area, and the second one in a really interesting way in the end of this area, if you know what I mean.
I agree. Let's listen to this track for a second, because now we're hearing the melody come in finally.
If I may, I do feel like we missed a slight opportunity. I feel like Dr. M64 could have, as opposed to just remixing those first two measures, or even this section, I feel like one track that's very underrated in the Metroid series is the Fires of Norfair from the original, from Super Metroid, the Upper Norfair track.
Yeah, that one does not
get...
That one doesn't get reused like anywhere in the franchise, and that is kind of a shame.
Yeah, it's because Ridley's track is so iconic, and I don't know. I'd be happy to see it used here, but I like the slow build up to Ridley's theme. Like you enter the tower area for the first time, and you're like, "Oh, he's gonna be there. That's awesome." They added him to Metroid 2, and he's not actually here, but this entire time, because underneath this tower is a completely new area. I think doesn't exist in the original Metroid 2.
That is correct.
And so, as a player, presumably if you have access to this fan game, you know something about the original Metroid 2, and you're like, oh, did they add him, did they add him, did they add him? And that really doubles down on the tension of this section.
And one of the reasons why I would have really liked to see the Fires of Norfair remix, though, is because I feel like between all the Prime games and Samus Returns and this game, I feel like the Super Metroid, I feel like the Ridley's Lair theme from Super Metroid is kind of overplayed, and it's too representative of a lava area in the Metroid game. Like, I'd like some oral differentiation.
Yeah. So one of the things that differentiates Metroid 2 from the others is that there was no escape sequence whatsoever in Metroid 2. AM2R addresses that here. And this is now my favorite escape sequence in the entire franchise. I think this is a masterful moment. What really makes AM2R awesome.
And here it pulls a Metroid Prime 2 and makes you fight a boss while you're trying to get out of the area.
That's right.
Unlike Metroid Prime 2, there's a real escape sequence behind it, though.
Yeah, that's true. In Metroid Prime 2, you get to the boss and you beat the boss, and that's it. There's no actual escaping after that. It's all cutscene.
Which was always a little disappointing. Like, even if they just let you jump into the portal.
I think that this is actually a fake escape sequence, by the way. I haven't tested that to confirm it, but I don't think you'll ever die. I think that the timer only ticks based on where you are to make it feel like
That is untrue.
you have to move. You can die here.
Yeah, this has a fail state. You are not wrong. I know what you're talking about. I know what you're thinking of. And yes, they do have an automatic up ramp of the tension when you get to the final doors, regardless. But if you just stood still and waited, that temperature gauge would fill and it would finish, and you would get a non-standard game over.
Okay. See, because there are certain points, not just to the very end, where I feel like it gets faster on you at certain points, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
I do believe it may get faster, but I believe that's consistent.
Okay.
Like, when you reach that certain point, the timer will just start ticking faster, I believe, in general.
Like right now.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, you really kind of have to move it here. If that timer is legitimately moving the entire time, then this is not an easy escape sequence the way I thought it was. I just thought it was artificially timed out, so you always arrived with like 10% left.
No. I believe I have tested it myself on my playthrough. You can die. There will be an explosion.
Okay. Because, like, you'll notice it's really moving right there, and now it slows down again. I got, like, 4 ticks right away, just like that. And I think it artificially speeds up there to create the tension for the moment that's coming up right now, and now it's going to slow down for a split second.
It meters itself on purpose, but you can lose.
Okay. So, for anyone who has played a Metroid game watching this stream, that fake-out is ginormously frightening. Because the actual Metroid games don't ever do that to you. Either you're out, or you die. There's no, you're close. And so the idea of that, the first time it happened to me, I like fell over, basically. When especially since I wasn't nearly as efficient at it.
Yeah, the first time I played the game, I thought that was a non-standard game over and that I had lost, and then I was just like, what?
They couldn't have the baby moment in this game where they reduce you to 1 HP, so they wanted to do it anyways.
Right.
Now, I'm curious how you feel about the, oh, don't forget about the power round door.
I have to refill right here, and then I'll go back.
Okay. But, I was gonna say, I'm curious how you guys feel about, like, the vibe of the Awakened Tower versus the Asleep Tower in terms of, like, music. Do you feel like they both are representative of, like, the feeling you would get from the areas? Like, the Awakened Tower, like, it's assumed that it's assumed that you've done a good bit into the area, Lord.
Well, here's the thing. It ruins my idea of the build-up from Ridley to Ridley, which I don't like. Otherwise, I think this track is pretty awesome. How's that?
That makes sense. And like I said, if you just reset, I believe you would just go back to the save point. If I am wrong and you cannot get past without fighting the tester, I thought you could.
I don't mind having to fight him right here, actually. What I don't like is having to climb through the tower twice, so whatever. I don't mind fighting this guy really fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Having the power ROMs definitely makes this section a bit less of a chore, though I do like how they have the dichotomy of the active versus the non-active rooms. One review of this game that I read had an interesting comment about the tester in that it's one of the only Metroid bosses that isn't really fighting you per se. It's really just doing its own programming, which feels a lot more Prime-y, honestly. It's another thing towards AM2R having a bit of a Prime vibe.
I can see that.
Like, its patterns don't change based on what you do. It'll do the same thing every time.
Right. And yeah, I don't mind actually doing that fight at all. It didn't take that long with the quick power bomb way in, which I was unaware of. And now I get the beam upgrade that I was going to skip, which is going to make the rest of the game go faster. Because this thing is awesome. Yeah, look, you can just annihilate stuff now.
Yeah. There's no worrying about the VAR beam here.
Alright, in any
I don't know
case,
if anyone
now
here
let's
is
move
familiar with
onward. Familiar with what?
The glitch in Super Metroid, the VAR beam.
Oh, right, where you accidentally activate all the beams at once, and then, yeah. So, in theory, I'm supposed to have power bombs right here, but there's an invisible block right there and right there that don't reveal themselves as super missile blocks, but you can get through without power bombs, and I was out, so we're going to take that shortcut.
That is one thing I felt that made AM2R almost feel a little more official Nintendo than Samus Returns, in that there's purposely, like, definitely developer-intended ways to skip specific upgrades.
To people who have never encountered this fan game before but are familiar with the Metroid franchise writ large, I just say it's Zero Mission 2.
Yeah.
And I would never make that description of the 3DS remake, if that makes sense.
You know, Samus Returns is very much a reimagining, whereas this is a bit more of a faithful retelling outside of, like, the additional elements. But, like, if you go to, like, the basic areas of the game, this remake is a lot more faithful.
Right. I feel like this is about as faithful as Zero Mission is, where they've added a lot of stuff on the side that's not essential, but every core element, like, if an area did exist, it's as it was in the original game. As close as possible, anyway.
Yes. Samus Returns, as I played it, I realized, especially, like, the scope of the game is insane. Like, even, like, within the first couple areas, you realize the maps are, like, double or triple the size of the original areas.
Yeah. This area, by the way, reminds me of Meridia, which makes sense to me. That's the water zone in Super Metroid. And here we've got this all-new water zone added to Metroid 2. So it makes sense that they look to a franchise's water zone for inspiration for the music.
I love the aesthetic of this area with, like, the whole moss-covered area, because it finds a way to incorporate both natural and technological themes while showing, like, that this it kind of, like, progresses the state of the game in terms of, like, the areas, like, being kind of decrepit and old while still, like, being active.
Yeah.
And one thing I like about it is how the graphic set is very different, but in what you mentioned, it kind of is doing the same thing Fusion did, just a little differently.
Yeah. Like the mixture of, like, biological environment plus space station.
Yeah. Which makes for a nice callback to Fusion, how that was a callback to Metroid 2 in the first place. So AM2R did a good job of pulling that in.
I agree.
Fusion has that very interesting feel where, like, AM2R is designed to have, like, these natural areas coming into, like, coexistence / conflict with the man-made areas, whereas all of the natural areas in Fusion are man-made, so you get that interesting, like, artificial feeling to even the areas that are meant to be natural. Like, I heard a game reviewer say it best once, whereas, like, Meridia in Super Metroid is a water area, whereas is like an ocean, whereas Fusion's water area is a fish tank.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's pretty accurate.
Alright, I don't have a lot of health. We're going to save before we go to the next room. Just in case I mess up the last Zeta fight. It's the hardest one of all of them by far. And
The Danmaku bots violate a normal rule of Metroid where you can't take damage without iframes.
That's right, yeah. Most of the time in these games when you get hit, you have this period where you can't be hit again. Those giant bubbles that erupt in balls everywhere, and this boss both break that tradition. They can just smoke you all the time.
One thing I really like about this area is that you have this double-sided coin when you're dealing with the little energy orbs, where they are inherently helpful to you, but if you aren't careful with them, they will bite you in the behind because they.
Yeah.
If you accidentally explode the top of you, you will be unable to fire.
Right. That effect is pretty cool, actually. We'll look at it here. So yeah, I can't shoot my beam or my missiles inside that giant sphere. So you can't just run and gun all the time, which is kind of another break from the franchise. Normally, like, your beam is a freebie. You can just constantly be shooting it and you're going to do fine.
I feel like the only other game that really tried to do something like was Super Metroid, and Super did it differently, where it wasn't that you couldn't run and gun, it was that there was a small number of situations where it wasn't the best thing to do.
Yeah.
But you totally had the option if you wanted to.
That's not the only thing in this area that does that either. Like those, I call them Danmaku bots because I'm a fan of Toho and that genre of games. But those little floating brain robots that explode are also another thing to discourage just running and gunning, because they will cause a chain reaction and they will kill you dead.
No, I have purposely shot at them a couple times, knowing I can run past them before they start blowing up. But generally speaking, if you don't know what you're doing, that's an awful idea.
There's especially some a room or two coming up that I specifically can remember where if you do that, you're dead. It's just over.
There's one room coming up, I think, where you can't do it. And then you can do whatever you want. It's this room, I think, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the game lets you do whatever you want after that.
If you fall here and touch one of those, they will all explode, and you have to get here before the chain reaction kills you. And you're basically going to die. This room is a race as well. I am going to chance it. And see, I had to wait it out because I lost the race. The idea is that... Oh, it's because my controller needs to be over here. I'm losing my Bluetooth signal. Ha! Not my fault. You can outrun those like that if you're fast enough. But not if I'm holding the controller more than like a foot from my tower, apparently. So this is one of the iconic Metroid power-ups. It's almost always the last power-up you get, though in the first game we're going to see next week that's not the case. And this is way stronger than they thought it would be. I can kill anything in the game now except for a Metroid if I'm jumping. I never have to fire my beam again, which again in this area is particularly good. I can just jump and victory.
I have to specifically ask something with regards to this, especially for those who have gotten this power-up in Samus Returns. How did you feel about the rebalancing of it? It bothered me a lot as a Metroid fan.
Yeah, I don't like it in Samus Returns. Similarly, I think it's dumb in Prime as well, where they also rebalance it. I like the idea of the series having this, like, one power-up that once you get it, you're invincible and amazing. It's one of the things that Zero Mission actually does very well, is that the moment you unlock it in Zero Mission, they let you have all the power that it came with in Metroid 1. And it's like, great, you win, good job.
One of the reasons I really like it as a power-up, though, is because so much, and this doesn't necessarily count for speedruns, of course, but so much of the Metroid series is specifically about exploration. So the fact that you get the screw attack, it certainly makes the rest of the game super easy when fighting enemies, but it's sort of a means to an end in that it makes fighting the enemies easier so that you can then go back to more exploration.
It facilitates exploration. There's a call out briefly to the Phazon suit from Metroid Prime right there in my mind, where you see Samus outlined in black and blue.
I think that's more of a Dark Samus call out because the Phazon suit was actually black and red.
Oh, true.
And I just wanted to touch on real quick because we didn't mention it before we leave this area. These tiles, these crazy looking like hexagon tiles in the background, they stop you from shooting
until you get the gravity suit. That's correct. Also, this whole area, and I'm going to leave it and never return. This is the musical theme that plays in the item rooms from Metroid 1 and a couple other places as well, but it's most prominent in Metroid 1. And I actually think this version of the theme is more faithful to Metroid 1 than the remake of Metroid 1's version of the theme is, which we'll be touching on next week with Will Gibbons, hopefully. Oh wait, I gotta go up and across.
But I just want to say that this is another thing, and we were talking about like the whole theme of like this water area has been like weapon denial. Like, don't just run and gun. That is the most literal. You cannot run and gun.
Right. And traditionally, after you get the gravity suit, they provide you an area to be like, oh wait, I can move in water now. This is that area for Metroid 2. Or at least for AM2R, I should say.
Will you be getting the ice beam? I believe you have to beat the game. I'm not certain.
Yeah, I will.
Now, one thing I wanted to mention that's very cool, unless you wanted me to wait to talk about the ice beam until you get it.
It's way overpowered here, if that's what you're going to point out. Which I like. I'm fine with.
Not only is it overpowered, but it specifically does not function like it does in any other game. Since you get all of your vertical movement upgrades before the ice beam in this game, specifically the Doctor removes its normal function of freezing most enemies in place in the air. Instead, they just fall because he knows that it's totally unnecessary.
Right, because I have infinite movement at this point, by any reasonable measure. And so you're right, the ice beam just kills everything in this game, when normally it's a key movement tool.
Okay, this fight was fun. I just loved falling in here and like 8 million Metroids come at you at once.
I agree.
It's a fantastic way to... It's about the only way that the game devs could have still shocked you with Alpha Metroids, and so I really appreciate it for that.
Yeah, and I think those are the last Alpha Metroids in the whole game.
There is one more, I believe. Yeah, there is one more.
Okay.
Wait. Yeah, this area is about as far as I got in AM2R. I haven't actually played past this, but I remember if it's anything like the original Metroid, then there is like one last alpha in the final batch of Omegas you fight.
I could be wrong. I don't quite remember how they phrase everything in terms of like the flow of the last couple areas, but I thought that they do still do the little fake out thing.
I didn't think so, but we'll find out.
How do you guys feel about the transplant boss?
Which boss?
In this area?
Oh, I think it's cool, actually. This is a smart callback to Metroid Fusion. Keeping in mind this game was developed after Metroid 4, but was supposed to have taken place before it. So they were able to borrow a couple things from Metroid 4 and put them into the environment in a way that the original game couldn't have done because the bosses hadn't yet been developed. So I think it's really smart. We'll see that right now.
I also find it interesting that without the context of the X, they very much change how this boss functions.
Yes. And since we're going to be done hearing it soon, I really like the whistle tone in this music. It sounds like if Metroid Prime had remixed Meridia to me. I love this track. Alright, on to the boss theme. This boss is from Metroid 4.
One interesting thing is that the track that was playing before this in the area is actually the only song that's fully originally composed in the game. Completely new, created for this by I cannot remember his name, but a very talented gentleman.
Nice. And the boss fight here, you fight this creature very differently here, because in Metroid Fusion with Metroid 4, you don't have the ice beam. You only have like a quarter of your potential gear when you have to fight him. He guards the speed booster in Fusion. And I think actually this is the more interesting version of the fight. Just because Samus has more access to tools, so they can do more with the fight. Before it's like, oh, he's moving around fast, you better shoot him. And now like you get to do the ice beam stuff and shatter his shell with missiles. Or, you know, if you don't figure it out, you can still shoot him with the beam and he'll eventually die. It just takes a lot longer.
And what's funny is that even though like you would be hard pressed to find someone who'd played AM2R but not any other Metroid game, this also kind of subtly hints towards the way to function against larval Metroids, which the game only introduces to you at the very end.
Yeah.
Like, because if you look at once you shatter those shell bits on him, they do appear somewhat akin to a Metroid, and it kind of hints towards using the ice beam and then a ballistic weapon to hurt them.
And I found that really, really smart, because that's one of the other things that Super Metroid does as well. And a lot of people don't realize this, and it's just like really brilliant on the developer side, how they will hide like tricks like that secretly teach you how to handle the in-game fights you're going to deal with without you realizing. Like in Super Metroid, you have the creatures that hop on you and just suck up your energy early on in Red Brinstar. And the trick for them is just laying down bombs, and at that point you learn how to lay down a bomb to get an enemy off of you.
Right, and that's how you deal with the Metroids if and when you have to.
Yeah. So it's nice that Dr. M64 was also kind of doing that same, like, brilliant level design here with teaching you how to deal with enemies that you don't realize right now that you would have to deal with later.
Right.
One more thing I wanted to say, just on the topic of the water area before we leave entirely.
Yep.
Specifically talking about...
I missed the double gamma fight. I gotta go back.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering about that. But,
got too excited.
Well, we were talking about how, like, Fusion's a fish tank. This, Meridia is an ocean. This game, specifically, at certain points, designed its water area to feel awkward, because this is never an area that was supposed to be filled with water. This is a Chozo-made facility designed for normal, like, land beings to function in. So specifically, especially before you get the gravity suit, a lot of these areas are very awkward to move around in, because it's architecture that was never designed for water.
Right. Hey, there's Spider Ball again. Look, it was useful one time.
It's never useful.
Okay.
I'm lying. It's useful. It's just horrible.
Yeah, I agree with
Speaking
that
of
mostly.
Spider Ball, I'm curious how you guys feel about the way that Samus Returns nerfed it. I feel it was kind of awkward and, like, heavy-handed.
I'm not sure. I'll leave that to Ryan, because I didn't get far enough into Samus Returns to see how that worked there.
I'm not a fan of any of the touchscreen activated powers in Samus Returns. How's that? I think Spider Ball is one of them, right? No. It's just there's a lot of surfaces that Spider Ball won't work on. Yeah, I hate it even more there, because at least, like, Spider Ball's a neat way to say and train you to look vertically, and then have cool ways to deny you or to make that a pain. And then later, when you get Space Jump, you kind of feel like you've been given the keys to the kingdom, if that makes sense. You don't get that progression in Samus Returns. Spider Ball just is dumb.
Yeah,
Because-
I felt the same way. I felt that the yellow goop was so heavy-handed. It was just like, it didn't even really teach you don't go here. It just taught you you're not allowed to go here.
Right.
Like, the original game did it in a much subtler way, where in certain sections, to force you off of a ceiling, they just have, like, a couple of spikes. But other than that, it mostly left you free to roam to your own devices to, like, test it out, and it would be your own boredom that would put you to move the heck on if you needed to.
Yeah.
Which was a very significant concern. I'm just saying. There was a lot of boredom there.
I will say this is yet again another new drone for a part of the game that had almost no music in Metroid 2. So, and now we're back to the main theme again for just a minute. A lot of cool uses of ambient sound here, though.
Just to be clear, though, this is not the exact same main theme that we heard earlier.
Correct, yeah, it has changed a little bit if you listen to it. Alright, I'm going to save here just in case I mess up, because we've covered a lot of ground.
There's actually a very cool thing that I discovered when I was doing speedrun routing for this game. It is actually possible to keep that run charge that you just got throughout this entire area all the way up to the Omega.
I figured it was probably possible, but I have not practiced into doing it.
I mean, I wouldn't expect you to. It's very intense at certain points.
Basically
Well-
reminds me of the final screw attack, or the final speed run you can do in Chizodia and Zero Mission.
Right. Where you keep your speed charge almost the entire time.
Yeah, but it's even longer than that. And the only reason it's even possible is because since Dr. M64 added an Instamorph button, if you time the Instamorph correctly as you land on the ground, you will keep your speed booster charge.
Right. You can do the Super Metroid Mach Ball Speedball thing much more readily here. In fact, I am good enough to demo that one time. Let me pick up here. I am supposed to turn up there, but we'll take a moment. Because I think that is cool. Okay, if I could jump there, there's a tiny gap. Alright. See, there you go. And that's not me doing like the double fireball motion from Super Metroid to do that via glitch. That's intentionally designed. It's a one-button shift. If you hit it on the appropriate frame, you'll keep it.
I've never heard of anyone mock-balling with a double fireball input, I'm not gonna lie.
In Super Metroid, it's not quite a double fireball, but it's close, because you have to jump, point your gun down, let go of jump, press jump again, then roll the fireball, right?
Yes. Well, roll the morph ball, not the fireball.
But if you want to go forward, you have to roll from down to forward, like you're throwing a Street Fighter 2 fireball. Otherwise, you'll unmorph.
Actually, you don't.
Oh, see? When it was first discovered, that's what people thought, and I've never looked up anything different.
Yeah, no, how it functions, you do have to hold forward once you hit the ground, but you won't unmorph or anything, like, you don't have to hold forward in the air at all.
Oh, right, but once you hit the ground, you've got to hold forward.
Yeah.
And I just find it easier to roll from down to forward as I'm transitioning from air to ground.
What's really interesting about Super Metroid is that, the mock ball can be done, like, most people only know about it, like, in terms of, like, the quote-unquote standard one, like, to do it across, like, one of the bridges that you would do it on, like, to get early supers and stuff like that. And with that one, you don't really need to worry about height, but it's actually possible to mock ball in, like, as small as, like, a 3-tile space.
Right. Yeah, you don't need a lot of running room to do it.
Yeah, you can just jump, let go of jump, and then press jump and hold down to still get into that same state, but not have to get that full jump height.
Alright, this fight, by the way, is wildly different from both Samus Returns and Metroid 2, and I think it's pretty smart. There's a weak spot on the back, where if you hit it, you'll do double damage, and I'm going to attempt that here.
If it compares to the original, it should be more than double damage.
It's 2.5 times, I think. There's one. You can kill it in 2 super missiles if you do it right, and if you get both weak points. But otherwise, it takes like 8. And I'm not having a good Omega fight at all. So now I don't want to die here. So we'll see. I did save for a reason, though. This fight is not easy.
That's one of the more controversial changes, is that these are actually significantly nerfed Omegas. Some people feel like they're too easy now.
That's right. In version 1.0 of AM2R, they were very hard. I'm gonna die. Yeah, I'm just gonna have to restart from that one save point and fight the last alpha that you guys mentioned, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, and then I will not have my controller desync during the fight, and I will win.
One thing I am curious about is, how do you feel that Samus isn't in the Zero suit? It's an interesting little touch. I wasn't certain what made them decide to do it that way.
How do I feel that what?
They decided to go with the kind of the fusion style / Zero Mission ending style outfit for Samus.
Oh, I'm fine with that. You're talking about the ending sequence that it's hand-drawn and she appears outside the suit?
Oh, the ending sequence and also the death animation.
Yeah, that actually doesn't bother me at all. It makes sense to model this after Zero Mission, given the art style. Alright, so now we're basically caught up to where I was. I have to fight that alpha circle again. That's not bad. And then I have to do better.
If we're not quite done with the game when it hits 11, while I do want to stick around, I may have to start packing up because I do have work in the morning.
Yeah, that's fine. We are very close at this point, but if people have to take off, I totally get it. And I know that Karen, who's been quiet this entire time because she's new to Metroid, has had a very busy week. So
It's true. I've been watching, though.
right, I actually think it's faster to double back at this point instead of circling all the way around. We'll try that.
You are correct, and that is also the original strat in the original Metroid 2.
Okay, using my speed charge into the wall right there was not the plan, but that's fine. Alright, let's see if this can happen here. The melody here before I hit the Omega, by the way, the timbres have all shifted very slightly from the original version of the main exploration theme, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah, I believe right now it's afternoon if you go up on the surface.
That's correct if you go all the way back up there. That changes as you hit this Omega. Hey, 1. Excellent. I'm the best. 2. There, he's done. It's 2 back shots and a normal one. Or 3 back shots. In the original version...
What bothers people.
Yeah, in the original version of AM2R, because remember he did get an update out before he got his DMCA, it was 6 super missiles to the back or 12 to the front, I think. It was some insane number. I'm actually glad for the change. I'm of the opinion, for almost every game, that if you can prove to the game you know the pattern, you deserve to be done with the fight.
I fully agree on that. There's no need to stretch things out.
Right, and the difference between having to hit that thing 4 times in the back or 6 times in the back versus 3, or 2 plus a single shot, is only padding. Like, that's it. But I can go this way now. Yeah, you can.
I believe in the original you had to hit it somewhere between 7 to 10 times in the back to kill it. But it also hitting the back weak spot would also stun lock the Omega Metroid, so you pretty much did get to stop playing the pattern. Like,
right,
if you hit it in the back, it'll freeze for a set amount of time, and as long as you got another one in within that time frame, you could continue and stun lock it all the way across the room.
Yeah.
You could actually do the same thing with Zetas, though. It was much more inconsistent, and you generally could only get it on their spawn pattern, which is why a lot of times it was literally faster to just, if you messed it up, just run outside of the room and come back in.
So I didn't have any problems on this run, but in all my test runs for the stream, I had more problems with the Zeta Metroids than I did the Omega we just fought, even though I died tonight, of course. But I think the Zeta Metroids, their pattern is harder to make something awesome happen with all the time. And so usually the Omegas are not a problem for me. The Zetas, if I'm going to fail, are where I fail.
One thing that's interesting is that both Metroid, both Samus Returns and AM2R went with the route of significantly upscaling the canon size of the Omega Metroid, which is interesting because it specifically is talked about in Fusion about how the Omega you fight at the end of the game is kind of like a, not fully mutated, but like abnormally large one, like because it essentially got hyper grown.
Right.
And so but they kind of use that as like the canon default size of an Omega Metroid, which I don't believe was the original intention, which is why they were smaller compared to Samus in the original game.
I approve of the change, both in AM2R and in Samus Returns. Partly because it connects it to Fusion more, and partly because it differentiates the fight more. Alright, jump for me. Nope, fire.
I'm curious how you feel about the evolution of the I'm fighting a Metroid theme from Alpha to Omega.
I actually think it's pretty cool. We haven't stopped and do it and to talk about it much, because if I stop and like to talk about the music during those Omega fights, I will die. But I do think it's pretty awesome. And it's actually one of those things that both remakes do well. Ooh, we're really close to finishing this by 11. I'm pleased.
One thing I will say is very nice about Samus Returns is that the instrumentation tends to be both a little more varied, but a little more quote-unquote Metroid-y. Where, like, the instrumentation feels like what I would expect out of a 2D Metroid game, whereas the instrumentation in this game definitely feels a little more primey because of such a focus on synth.
I agree with that.
Especially, like, I have no words to describe the Red Brinstar remix from Samus Returns other than lush. It perfectly fits the, like, tropical, like, deep underground, like, almost lake area that you find it in. Like, it feels like a rainforest.
Yeah, Metroid 2 Samus Returns has excellent music. And though I don't think the music here is bad by any means, and I'm having fun talking about all the references, the 3DS has the better soundtrack. There's no question about that.
I think it's a difference of intent. Like, I'd argue that there's more experimental done with the songs in this one. Like, he doesn't just remix the Prime music, he uses it as a cue to, like, create a Metroid 2 soundtrack out of Prime music.
Right.
But Samus Returns is a bit less experimental with their mixes. They're pretty traditional.
Yeah, as far as all the borrowings from Metroid Prime, I feel like Zero Mission borrows a ton and really sets the tone for this game.
Speaking of Zero Mission, one interesting thing to me is that they use a song that you can hear almost nowhere in the game.
In Zero Mission?
Yes.
Oh, where's it at? So I make sure to catch it next week.
When you very first enter the Space Pirate Mothership, before you are ever sighted in the first couple of rooms, they remix the wrecked ship theme from Super Metroid, and it only appears in those rooms, as far as I know.
And that's like 2 or 3 rooms, and then it's over, and you never hear it again.
That's right. Right after you enter the mothership, but before you hit the map room, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is technically possible. Perfect Stealth is almost frame perfect because it's so hard to get past that first pirate, but it is technically possible. You can hear that song all the way to the Chozo test.
You have to be fantastically good at that stealth section to pull that off, though. I'm never going to be that good.
Oh, yeah, because it goes away once you get caught once, right?
Yeah.
So using save states, I have in fact done it without ever being caught. But our stream next week with Dana and Will is not going to do that. Screw that. I hate that section. And I love stealth games. And I'm reasonably good at them. But man, there are a couple moments in the Metroid Zero Mission stealth sequence that are legitimately unfair.
Yeah, no, there's a couple of them where like the pirate will just almost always turn around.
Right.
One interesting little thing. This is another section where from that initial green slope you ran down, you can keep your speed booster all the way through this.
Yeah, you can.
Very challenging, but you can.
This is actually the hardest sequence to keep it through. That red lava sequence you mentioned earlier is something I could have done if I would have put forth more effort. This is beyond what I can do. This is like Metroid Fusion Shinespark glitch level. You have to use this one hill right there, and then go up and up and up. Use this hill, etc.
Yeah, I was able to do that a couple of times when I was like routing this game for speedrunning.
Right. If I would sit down and like play this game like I was really routing for time instead of just, can I finish this within a 2-hour span, then I'm incapable of that type of stuff, but it takes a level of practice I didn't have time to give. So this musical track is really cool, by the way. And this is very similar, even in timbre, to the Game Boy games version, if I'm remembering right. Yes?
Yeah.
And I don't think Samus Returns does that.
The Samus Returns track for this area, I honestly don't really remember very much. I feel like it was relatively forgettable.
And I've only heard it on YouTube. This is beyond where I got in Samus Returns. So there's a cool moment right here. It spoils it for you. If you pause, it says you have 9 Metroids left. Normally, what it does is it says 0 in both of the other versions of the game until right here. And you're like, oh, what's that thing? And then you realize what it is. And then your counter ticks back up to 9. And notice how we're having like a weird Steve Reich-ish effect, where everything is coming out of phase in the melody line, for lack of a better way to describe it.
Another interesting thing, I can't quite hear the game music, so I don't remember how if the Doctor transitioned this thing into this game as well. But in the original, at least, the timbre of the song changes after the Metroid reveal right there. Like when you get the whole shock chord on seeing the Metroid egg, the song changes pitch while maintaining the same sound.
That's true here as well. It adds a layer. This is the only version of any Metroid game where they maintain their momentum after you've frozen them, and that actually makes this series of rooms far more difficult than it is in any other Metroid game. Okay, there's got to be one more in this room somewhere.
I found it interesting that they chose to go with the zero mission method of spawning Metroids.
Oh yeah, the way they just physically faded from the background.
Yeah. Hey, did my game glitch? Am I supposed to not spawn a Metroid here? Here, we're just gonna do this.
Yeah, you have not. I don't believe you found the bottom of this room yet. I could be wrong.
That's what I thought as well, but I'm having some trouble doing it. And the power bombs didn't do anything for me.
Yeah, this is a little weird. I have not heard of anyone getting stuck in a room forever, so
I did just save before this, so I could do reset, which I might.
That's quite strange.
Yeah, we're gonna do that. We're already in the genetics lab. It's not a long setback. That's
a new one for me. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's new for me as well. You'll notice, by the way, if you don't pause, well, that's why you do hit things like hit that save point in a marathon format, right? If you don't pause, the counter does jump from 0 to 9, if you don't spoil it for yourself. So it is possible to have that original moment. But I wish he had modified the world map down so that it would... And there, now that we've had it, is your phasing thing. Alright.
An interesting change that the Doctor decided to make, that ruined Chozo statue is not something you would have necessarily ever seen in the original game unless you had to. In the original game, when you got to the top of the big waterfall room right before the genetics lab, there were 3 entrances you could go. One had a save point, one had missile and a health refill. One had the ice beam with the ruined Chozo, and then one had the actual entrance to the area. I don't know how I feel about him adding it the entrance like that to this area, just because the path, as far as I can tell, is intended. Like, it is a path that existed that the Chozo researchers could have used, like a back access area. So hiding it behind a wall like that feels kind of odd.
Yeah, and my issue with that is that in the original Metroid, it was pretty clearly a sort of a lore thing. If you were paying attention, the fact that you found that Chozo, the broken Chozo statue, right next to the ice beam,
Yeah,
it kind of makes it clear that like the Metroid Queen or something knew what danger the ice beam had to them and purposely like broke the statue and tried to.
Right, I do like that part. By the
And
way,
that
I'm
doesn't
not
really
going down
apply
to the
here.
next. I'm not going down to the next room yet because we have this really cool drone, the last of these ambient drones, and this one's like, "Hey, what's up? You're about to fight the last thing. There's counters 1. There's this weird spikes. You hit this dead end. Down you go. Here's the last
Well,
one."
what's interesting is that that's one of the only drones that did appear even in the original game.
Was it actually different than the regular one that appeared everywhere else in the original?
Yes. That one room has a specific special sound that sounds almost the same as that leading up into the Queen. And you can even hear her screeches echoing from the corridor.
This fight has been changed from the original, and I really like what they've done with it.
Like I said, when given the opportunity, Ryoji Yoshitomi like tried to do what he could in terms of maintaining the atmosphere, like he did. It's just that like the Game Boy was not very suited to drones that didn't sound like your ears wanted to die.
Right.
I do think that this fight does a lot better of a job of making you really feel like you are fighting a massive creature out to kill you, because like Samus is constantly getting shoved back further and further.
Yeah, and no other creature in any of the previous Metroid games, that is to say previous, I mean any of the other ones, because this is the chronologically latest one to come, you can't fight anything that like breaks a door down in any other Metroid game, except for this fight. It's a really cool moment.
I agree with the sentiment of what you're saying, but I will say that's not technically true because you do kill an SAX.
Oh, that's true. The SAX never breaks down the door during the fight with you.
That is correct.
But I am happy to concede that the SAX can in fact bust down the door. We're going to be talking a
Which
lot
is another
about that 3 weeks from now, I think, because we do Zero, then Super, then Fusion, yeah. Alright. And at this point, we have won. The fight is over. In a cool callback to both Metroid 2, but especially also Other M, you can roll here, and if you plant a power bomb, you get a custom cutscene.
Yeah, you can kill. Like there are 3 death cutscenes for the I believe for the Queen. I'm pretty sure that bombs give you a different one than power bombs, but I'm pretty sure that you can kill it with normal missiles, can't you?
You can, it's just not as cool. In both Metroid 2 and in this game, you have silence here. I don't know what Samus Returns does. I think it adds more tension to the last part of this, because they stick a Ridley fight in there. They actually bring Ridley as a post-game boss. But now we're done fighting, which is just super chill. You walk over, and you realize you missed one in a moment that is probably the most iconic moment in the franchise.
One thing I will say, Samus Returns does do the does still use this song up until the final area, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, this song is a remix from the Game Boy game. It's really cool. It's like there's no escape sequence here. You're just slowly making your way back to the ship now. And there are a couple rooms in this remake where you can encounter these green bricks beforehand. and only this little baby Metroid can eat them. And as we've been hinting before, when we get back up to the surface now, it's going to be evening. So the idea is that this has taken place in over the course of a single day.
Samus is a very quick and efficient murderer of entire ecosystems.
That's right.
But at least this planet doesn't blow up in this game.
Right.
Sorry about that. Got a call.
Alright, Patrick, do you have to go, or? Here we
Just
go.
a moment.
Alright.
Just want to make sure you guys can still hear me.
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I think that the differences in the endings different really kind of portray that, like, while the peaceful endings in the first two games, the peaceful endings in Metroid 2 and in AM2R kind of give a sense of finality, which leads into like Super being the kind of the closing out of like Metroid at the time.
Right.
Whereas I think Samus Returns is meant to have a bit more of an aggressive ending because, like, it's not. This isn't meant to be like leading into a magnum opus. This is supposed to be kind of the reopening of the Metroid series as well.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely a sense, we're going to find out right after these credits, that AM2R is created with the understanding that Metroid 2 points to Metroid 3. There's no way around that.
But it has been great doing all this with you guys. I really appreciate you guys giving me the chance to do this. If you need anyone for any of your other Metroid episodes, feel free to let me know. I'd be more than happy to pop back in again. I've put plenty of time into speedrunning the other games as well and done my fair share of research and understanding on them, and I definitely love their soundtrack, so I'm more than happy to come back.
Alright, sounds good. Alright, thanks, Patrick.
Alright, you guys have a great night.
Yeah, you too.
You too, take care. Oh, that's really sad.
I know, right? So there's a really cool thing coming up. That's one of those, like, only an official remake would do it, but somehow this unofficial thing manages to slip it in. Is this moment here.
The last Metroid.
That's fantastic.
And that is how Super Metroid opens, for those of you who have not played it. We'll see it in 2 weeks. Part of the reason I was willing to move Metroid 2 around with Metroid 1, in addition to working around a couple people's schedules, is that the remake of Metroid 1 takes place in all the same geography that the third Metroid game does. So by putting them right next to each other, we get to see the same places over and over in a way that we can process a little better. Anyway, that's our introduction to the Metroid franchise. And hope you guys had a good time watching with some new people. A few people are taking a break for a while. March is really, really busy. In Facebook chat, all of our regular hosts have just been exhausted, basically, with March. We're done with it already, and it's halfway through the month. Hopefully April's a lot better. But for now, we're going to call the stream for the night. And see everybody next week with, hopefully, Dana Plank and Will Gibbons highlighting some stuff on Metroid 1 for us all.
Cool.
See everybody next week.
All right, thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye.